All right. So sorry for the late start there by a few minutes, so we could probably just jump right in. I am assuming everyone can see our presentation now. If you can't, please let us know in the chat. So we'll start off. We'll introduce ourselves really quick here, since we're running a few minutes behind. My name is Mike Hess. I am with the city of Orlando. Excuse me, and I am leading our development of our Future Ready Master Plan, which is also known as our Smart City Master Plan. Chris?
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Castro, also with the City of Orlando. I direct the Office of Sustainability and Resilience. Many of you might have heard of the Greenworks Orlando Initiative, which is our brand, and part of the steering committee here for our Future Ready plan.
So today we're going to walk through our Future Ready plan. We're going to give you a little bit of history on what the City of Orlando has been doing in the smart city space in the past. We're going to focus a good bit on the community engagement effort that we use to develop our Future Ready plan. And the reason for that, and we'll touch on this probably a few times today, is to us, Smart City and Future Ready is not all about just going and finding the shiniest new object or the coolest new technology. It's really about engaging our community and really understanding what's important to them and having them define what smart city is and what kind of issues we want to solve, and then really layer in technology. So we'll touch on that, but I wanted to hit it from the very beginning. And so those pictures you see are actually from some of our community meetings. You can see Commissioner Sheehan, Commissioner Burns, and all hundreds of people from the community that actually helped us develop this plan. And then we're also going to talk through some of the goals and strategies in this plan. There are dozens of them, so we can't possibly cover them all today, but we will show you a link where you can see the whole plan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who was really with the city, has been with the city a much longer time than me. I'm relatively new with the city and really started our smart city efforts before I came on board. So Chris, I don't know if you want to talk through some of the history of our smart city planning.
Yes, sir. And for many of you, this concept of smart cities here in Orlando is not really new in the grand scheme of things. We have been working to elevate innovation and technology throughout our community for several decades. And I think when you look back to where the impetus of us thinking differently about our city started out when Mayor Dyer launched Greenworks Orlando Initiative back in 2007. And at that time, thinking about what are the ways in which we can continue to make Orlando a competitive city in the 21st century, one that attracts business development and the creative class, and one that embraces diversity, inclusion, equity, and of course, environmental protection. And so Greenworks was launched with that mindset of transforming Orlando into a more environmentally friendly, socially inclusive and equitable and economically vibrant powerhouse in the country. Fast forward a little bit more, we started to gain a lot of traction with Greenworks, and it wasn't until January of 2016 when this concept of smart cities really started to materialize here for Orlando. Of course, the U.S. Department of Transportation solicited for proposals for a $50 million grant project called the Smart Cities Challenge. And we were one of 79 cities across the country focused on mid-sized cities that were trying to get our hands on that capital to transform primarily the transportation sector within our city. And that really started to kickstart this process of bringing together, core stakeholders in our communities across various partner agencies, businesses, academia, and the like, and really trying to help us define what we mean about smart cities here in Orlando. Fast forward a little bit more, about a year later, we realized first and foremost we were not successful in landing that Smart Cities Challenge. That was Columbus, Ohio, that ended up winning the gold on that one. We were shortlisted in the top 10 cities that were being looked at. But shortly after that, we decided to apply for another opportunity, the Smart Cities Council Readiness Grant. And this grant really chose 5 cities in the United States, and it was intended for us to build a foundation to begin asking ourselves the right questions and bringing together the right stakeholders to start formulating a smart city plan for Orlando. So we were a winner of that, an inaugural, one of the first 5 cities to win that grant, and that helped us to really start that process. Almost a month later, we also were in the process of applying for a designation by the U.S. Department of Transportation to make Orlando a proving ground for autonomous and connected vehicles. We quickly pulled together a regional network of partners in government and academia primarily, and we called that the Central Florida Automated Vehicle Partnership, also known as CFAVP. That partnership is still alive and well today, and it's made up of institutions like NASA Kennedy Space Center, the city and county government, of course, UCF, Florida Polytechnic, FAMU, and many others who have really focused on coming together to ensure that we're finding grants and that we're doing the necessary research, development, and deployment of these autonomous and connected vehicle technologies. So certainly, building on this process. And then I will close in saying that we've been successful because of CFAVP and the Readiness Challenge in pulling in other funding that has allowed our community to move forward in this respect, and not just wait for a plan to be published, but really start to do some proof of concepts and some demonstration projects that we knew were high priorities. One of the grants that I think is a big one was a $12 million ATC MTD grant in partnership with MetroPlan, the City of Orlando, UCF, and FDOT to begin testing and starting to demonstrate not just autonomous shuttles, but smart pedestrian technologies that help mitigate any fatalities or crashes, and really improve the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists throughout the city, leveraging technology. So that really led us, this progress up until basically about 18 months ago, when we were fortunate to be able to bring on Mike as our Director of Future Ready, and really take a lot of the early lessons that we've learned through this timeline and begin to craft and formulate the Future Ready master plan that we're going to be presenting to you today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And Chris, actually, quick question. I'm assuming you can see the chat. I cannot actually, because I'm in a presenter mode on my computer.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So you'll have to relay anything from the chat, and you'll actually notice Chris and I talked about this before the presentation. I think a lot of us have a little bit of fatigue from all of these web conferences, so we're actually trying to make of a conversation. We're going to bounce back and forth a little bit, and we're actually going to ask some questions while we're going. So hopefully everyone's paying attention and gets engaged, and feel free to ask questions as we're going as well. So Chris just rolled through the history, and then one of the things as I came on board, the city had actually already started this process of understanding that we wanted to have a more comprehensive plan. We've done a lot of great things in the smart city space. We've done a lot of great things from a technology perspective, but technology is advancing rapidly, and so we wanted to start thinking through what might a broader plan look like. And so that's really what sparked us to develop this smart city master plan. And as I said earlier, really, probably the biggest component of this was around community engagement. And so while I say that, I'll actually ask a question. One of the exercises we did as part of our community engagement process for this plan was to actually interview our community about, what do you think a smart city is? So I would encourage anyone, if you're in the chat, just type a one-word answer. You can put more than one answer. How would you define a smart city? Is it connectivity? Is it energy efficiency? And we'd honestly like to just compare those a little bit with some of the other things we've heard from our community during this process. So we'll wait a second there.
Yeah, please feel free to add your definition or your thoughts there in the chat as we move forward. But I think that leads us to kind of our community engagement process. And as Mike's mentioned, too often cities look at this as a smart cities, that is, as a technology-led initiative, and we really thought differently about that, especially in going through our Readiness Challenge efforts and workshops that we held in the community. We realized that this is an opportunity for our city to meaningfully address a lot of the challenges facing our community, residents and business leaders, and do so with the lens of technology, innovation, sustainability, and the like. The first thing that we did when we kickstarted even the Smart Cities Challenge effort is Mayor Dyer asked us to pull together a task force, an internal future-ready task force that was made up of department directors and senior level city officials to begin, essentially trying to pull together what our framework looked like. I sat on that. Our CIO, Rosa Activacari, our head of public works, Rick Howard, our chief of police, Orlando Rolon, and many others were very engaged in the early onset of crafting what we meant. In addition, Mike talked about hosting these internal city stakeholder interviews, and these were intended to really bring together departments and divisions within the city and the leadership of those enterprises to provide some candid feedback from a perspective of economic development or a perspective of public safety, or of course solid waste and public works. We really wanted to hear candid feedback from those various parts of our operation to ensure that we were weaving and incorporating their vision about what future ready and smart cities meant for them, right? In addition to the internal stakeholder interviews, we decided to host these focus area roundtables where we invited those internal members who we interviewed, but also simultaneously put together a list of subject matter experts and SMEs and kind of practitioners in the field of our various pillars to participate in these focus area roundtable meetings. And so we really dove into topics like energy and connectivity, and water resources, and tried to get internal and external feedback to develop, quite frankly, a short list of short-term and medium-term strategies that we felt were important to move Orlando forward in a more future-ready direction. From those focus area roundtables and developing that list of potential strategies that we gathered, internal and external, we then started this public workshop engagement where we held several workshops across all commissioner districts in Orlando and made sure that we were engaging residents across the city and helping us to gather more ideas, more strategy ideas for how to advance Orlando, but in addition, help us to vote on some of those core strategies and prioritize them, right? Finally, we did online surveys for those that weren't able to join us for focus area roundtables or public workshops. We certainly opened up a survey for hundreds of residents to be able to prioritize their thoughts and their definition of what Future Ready was about. And so that shows you over the course of about 14 months or so, the amount of community engagement that we did to ensure that we were co-creating this plan, that it wasn't something that we were doing in the back of the room in City Hall, but we were truly being fully transparent and trying to ensure that the strategies that ended up in this plan were priorities that the community told us we needed to address.
Yeah, so I'll actually dive a little bit further into those internal stakeholder meetings that Chris mentioned. So one of the exercises we did is really the question I just asked you all of, how would you define a smart city? So we actually see here is a word cloud that was developed from roughly 15 separate department level meetings within the city where our city staff started to define, their concept of a smart city. And Chris, when you take over here in a little bit, you can sort of check and see if this is consistent with what we're seeing in the chat. I'm guessing there are a lot of consistent terms, but I wanted to touch on just a few that really jumped out at me the most. Connected, resilient, and equitable and inclusive are probably some of the key terms that I really focus on when thinking through our smart city planning efforts. So, when you think of connectivity combined with equity and inclusivity, it really starts to point towards digital divide. Same thing with resiliency. When you start to combine resiliency with equity, we're really talking now about equitable resilience. And not everyone can afford a backup generator during a hurricane or to stock up on food. And so how can the city actually work to ensure a higher level of resilience for our entire community? So Chris, I'm not sure if there's any words that jump out to you here?
Yeah, I
That you
mean,
want to touch on?
obviously, as our sustainability and resilience officer, I mean, I think sustainable and resilient, it was encouraging to hear that when we look at the future of our city, those are core terms. But I also saw things like inclusivity and innovation, and as well as intelligence, right? We're seeing in the chat here, and thank you all for adding your thoughts, that obviously technology is comes to mind for a lot of people when we start talking about smart cities. But there's a couple of definitions here that I think really speak out to what we were looking at. One, leveraging technology to enhance quality of life of residents and visitors, and by all means, that's definitely in lockstep with where we're trying to go, right? Not just using technology for its sake, but really trying to address a core issue and enhance quality of life, health, well-being, safety, you name it. There's also a lot of thoughts around connectivity across the city, gathering intelligence using real-time information. And so as you can see, if you were all in these rooms, many of your core themes would also have made it into this word cloud. And yeah, it's really good to see that, there's a lot of similarities there in how people define this.
Yeah, so as Chris mentioned, after we did all of our internal interviews with our city departments, we moved on to these focus area roundtables, which were actually a mix of both city staff and local experts. And one of the things I wanted to sort of build upon what Chris said is, we did start to define strategies in these focus area roundtables, but those weren't necessarily the end strategies. The reason we did that is smart city and future ready are these really, really broad terms. And, even myself, I mean, sometimes when you hear that, you kind of struggle to say, well, what does that really mean? And so we wanted to really put out some example strategies before we moved into the community meeting so that, we could show our residents, hey, here are some ideas that we've already been brainstorming as new strategies. And they did get to vote on that. But another huge important piece of those community roundtables was for them to see some ideas and hope that that would spark even new ideas that we hadn't thought of in these focus area roundtables. And so we had community meetings in all 6 of our districts, and luckily we had Chris Castro participating in those community meetings, helping to run some of the stations. So Chris, I don't know if you want to touch on community workshops.
Yeah, and the community workshops, again, we held these at many of our neighborhood centers around the city, and it was intended for the community for the first time, many of them that weren't in these roundtables, to be able to come out and, one, learn about what we're talking about, and 2, provide their input. So as you can see, these were examples of some of the boards. On one of the boards, we had kind of an overview of what we are already doing here in the city to advance future ready, as well as some of the core goals and objectives. And one thing that you'll realize in reviewing this plan as you move forward is that we really deliberately did a good job at tying in some of the existing plans that the city had already created, things like the Greenworks Community Action Plan, the Vision Zero plan that Transportation Department has developed. And the idea behind this Future Ready plan was to encourage and to bolster, as well as to further those goals. They weren't to create new goals for energy. We already have clean energy goals of achieving 100% renewables and clean and renewable energy by 2050. So we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We were more trying to identify what are additional technologies, data, innovations that we can incorporate to accelerate exceeding those goals that we've set out. And then on the right-hand side, you see another board that was there of potential strategies. And again, those were captured in the internal as well as the focus area roundtables, internal interviews and focus area roundtables. And the public was able to, with stickers, of course, vote on their highest priorities and also provide additional strategies that didn't make it on that board. And so we gathered dozens of different ideas from the community that we were able to take back and begin vetting, to identify, what's going to land in the plan.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about our plan and our community engagement process is it actually wrapped up our initial community engagement. We actually wrapped up just before COVID-19 and pandemic lockdowns. And so And then also just several months later, unfortunately, that we had the George Floyd incident, and this real broader push towards racial equity. And so, one of the things we did with this plan is the world was very different from when we did our initial community engagement versus when we were really starting to develop strategies. So we actually took a little bit of a step back. We had a mid-project review session where we really thought through some of the COVID impacts. I think Kathy DeVault from the city was on. Kathy, our mayor, actually hosted some listening sessions, and Kathy was actually instrumental in filtering through those listening sessions that the mayor was doing and providing it to this plan for some additional community engagement. And so we really saw this need to enhance our community engagement just because we're under this new normal. I think what was really interesting about that is a lot of the things that we were hearing in January, February were really amplified by some of our current events. So digital divide, I think, is a perfect example of that. We were listening to our community back in January about digital divide and lack of connectivity for some people, and then obviously COVID-19 hits, and everything we're doing is digital now. So it's just become even more important. So it was interesting that we identified it even before it happened. And we're actually still doing one more round of community engagement. So we've actually created a draft plan, but just because of the new normal, we really wanted to sort of put that out there one more time and give our community one last chance to review it, comment on it, see if we missed anything. And so I would encourage anyone on this discussion, go to our website. You can see it there. We'll post it again at the end of the presentation in case you don't get it written down. We've actually created a virtual meeting room where you can see our plan. There's a video that talks about it. There are comment boards, and it's really just one last place to engage on what's really version 1 of this plan. It's going to be a living plan that's going to continue to evolve over time, but this is really kind of finalizing our initial version. And so I know Chris has spent all kinds of time in the virtual room. So Chris, I don't know if you want to touch on that experience.
Yeah, most definitely. I think this is a really unique way that we are trying to get one last bit of public input and engagement on this plan. And so when you go to the Future Ready website that's there, you'll see a link to get into the virtual workshop. And as Mike was mentioning, we have everything from a Start Here video that has a great overview of this entire initiative. If you had never heard of Future Ready Orlando, that'll catch you up. And then it goes around the room in different panels to look at what the mission and vision is. What are the core goals and objectives per pillars? What are the actual key priority areas? And then it provides opportunities for you all to provide comment and input. And so you'll see there in that image at the left, it says comment box, and it provides a little web-based form for you to provide significant input. And you'll actually see you can download the draft plan as well as the appendices, which includes not just our strategies, but part of this plan is also an implementation roadmap. We really wanted to identify not just what we could do, but what is the priorities of what we're gonna implement, by when, and how much do we anticipate needing to spend, whether it's through city dollars or public-private partnerships, to accelerate those goals. So it's a lot of information. And a tremendous amount of work, but we really want to encourage you all, especially those who are participating in this session, to go to that website and to provide some input and feedback over the next week or so that we can make sure that it lands in the final draft.
Yeah, so one of the tasks with that we wanted, or one of the things we wanted to come out of this community engagement with, was to further refine our vision and mission. In the history part of this presentation at the very beginning, Chris talked about the Smart City Readiness Challenge, and within that process, we actually came up with a draft mission and vision statement. But as full community engagement, we actually had a lot of public review and comment on those statements, and they remain pretty similar. But I did want to touch on one change, and it's really the last few words of the vision statement. So as you saw in those common themes, we heard a lot about equity and inclusion, diversity. And so we really wanted to make sure that that was somehow captured in our vision statement. And so that, those last few words about, a place where everyone can thrive, we felt like was so important based on what we heard, that it really had to belong in our vision and mission. And you'll actually see those again in our foundational elements, which sort of build off that mission and vision. One of our foundational elements is prosperity for all. And I'll actually tell you the importance of these foundational elements. We actually use these as we were, finalizing which strategies we wanted to go forward with, sort of thinking through the priorities of which strategies should happen in the short term versus the longer term. So those concepts around, making sure there is prosperity for everyone were really a huge part of development of this plan. Chris, I don't know if you want to touch on mission, vision, foundational elements.
Yeah, the one thing I want you all to know is that, the reason why Future Ready is how we define this effort is because we realize that, first of all, we've been doing smart things in the city for a long time. We've been leveraging technology and data, and it's almost been like a smart city 1.0, where it's been kind of siloed efforts, whether it's focused on intelligent transportation systems or focused just on grid modernization and renewables or whatnot, right? They've been siloed. And this evolution that we're moving into is a more interconnected way for us to look at on driving intelligence within our city and driving efficiency at the end of the day and quality of life. And so Future Ready, at the end of the day, we don't know what the future holds for us. But through this planning process, we can certainly get ahead of the curve and be prepared for any disruptions, whether it's technology or otherwise, by having this perspective, by focusing on being a future ready, the premier future ready city for America. And that's a big reason, and got to give a shout out to our Office of Community Communications and Neighborhood Relations, who really worked with us on trying to brand as well as design this plan so that it's inclusive. And again, to Mike's point, something that everyone can relate to and can feel ownership of. So yeah, I was going to say, as it relates to the pillars. So, in the Readiness Challenge, we were given kind of standard areas of focus that many smart cities around the world, utilize to scope out what we mean. And so, as you can see here, we've developed these 7 core focus areas, and they don't necessarily match up with many other smart city plans that you see in maybe other communities. Some of them do around energy and connectivity and materials and waste and water management. But I think placemaking and health and safety were 2 kind of core areas that within our plan may set us apart, from other communities. And I think it's not every day that you think about technology or data or analytics in the mindset of placemaking or even public health and safety. But we realized that those are huge opportunities. And when we were trying to develop this plan around addressing community needs, we realized that those were 2 really important areas among the other ones that we wanted to include in this plan.
Yeah, and I would add to that, these are really the pillars for our initial version of this plan. These could evolve. There could become more pillars. I think some of these categories, like placemaking, as we continue to think through our overall placemaking strategy, we'll continue to look for technologies that may support some of those efforts. So, but we really had to start with some buckets to organize this plan, and I think it'll continue to evolve. And so with that, we wanted to dive into just a handful of the goals and strategies that are in this plan. Again, I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go to that virtual meeting room and take a look, because there's a lot more. But we want to touch on just a few that I think are really important. And so the first one, which to me, I think may be one of the most important concepts in this whole plan, is around the digital divide. And this goes all the way back towards the beginning of this presentation when we talked about connectivity and equity. That's what our community had a lot of interest in. And so one of our goals within this plan is for the city to work on bridging that digital divide. And one of the challenges with that is actually, really you have to start by even defining the digital divide. So there's various data sets out there around the digital divide. probably the information that's used the most is around the census, and the census actually breaks down digital divide into different zip codes. But we wanted to start to look at it more granular. So we started looking at what are some strategies to actually dive even further into identifying the digital divide. And so that picture you see here is actually a partnership that we formed with one of the companies that does internet speed tests. And so they're actually feeding us data on where they're seeing broadband connectivity, what speeds they're seeing with that broadband, and we can actually zoom in to the almost the block level, and that's actually helping us. So I mean, you see this map here. It actually shows a few of our zip codes. One of them is actually the 32801 zip code, which per census data looks like there's really not much of a digital divide there. But when you start to break down the 32801 zip code into a couple of different parts, you can see, there's great connectivity in some parts of 32801 and, almost no connectivity in other parts. And so, we're really trying to look at innovative ways to really pinpoint, where we need to attack the digital divide. At the same time as we've got this strategy to define the digital divide, we also want to start to put tools in our toolbox, so to speak. So one of the things you probably saw from the city of Orlando a few months ago is we expanded some of the Wi-Fi at our community centers to support some of the Orange County Public Schools Launch Ed students. So we actually had kind of a quick scramble to expand some of our Wi-Fi systems. We are also getting very close to starting a pilot project in which we'll provide hotspots and tablets at our community centers that residents can actually check out and use those devices. And so, some of the use cases we saw there from our community engagement, in the pandemic, there are senior citizens that, used to do yoga classes and art and all those things. And because they're a vulnerable population for COVID-19, now a lot of them, they aren't able to do those in-person activities. They do not have some of the connectivity and devices that some of the rest of us have. And so can we actually start to provide those resources? So we've actually been having conversations with some of our senior living facilities around this pilot. Also, if you lost your job, you can't afford to pay your internet bill, but in today's world, you need the internet to be able to find a job. And so the tablets that we're looking at will actually come with preloaded information to help some of those different use cases, like senior citizens, people that need them to help find jobs and write resumes. So look for that pilot to hopefully come out soon. And so, digital divide, I think, was a huge focus area. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris. He's going to talk about another extremely important area of this plan.
Yeah, so resilience, as you saw in that word cloud, continue to pop up as an area that people wanted us to prioritize. How do we make Orlando a more resilient city? And when I think of resilience, it's really, I think of an immune system in somebody's body, right? It's about ensuring that we can address any chronic issue, shock or stress that hits our city, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's an extreme weather event like a super storm or super hurricane. These are all things that we're having to look at. And so one of the things that we identified is we need to develop a pretty comprehensive resilience plan. And it's not just enough for the city, we need to look more regionally. So I see a couple of comments around how are we collaborating with other communities. One, really important one is the establishment of the Regional Resilience Collaborative. We've actually created a collaborative now of over 35 governments, 5 counties, and over 20 cities within East Central Florida, and are working together on defining resilience, on working on economic recovery strategies, and starting to identify some of the early data needs to develop a strategic plan for resilience. In short, though, we are starting to look at mapping data gaps that we have within the community and needs, quite frankly. And one of the areas that we're looking at is what's called resilience hubs, which are ways in which we can turn things like our neighborhood centers into a hub as for resources during some type of disaster or emergency. And so we're starting to look at, as an example, the Grand Ave Community Center is a new community center under construction that we're looking to incorporate a lot of these resilience hub components, things like redundant electricity systems with rooftop solar and battery storage, things such as ensuring that you have a food pantry and ice storage and water storage and the like, so that in times of a grid outage or a disaster, this could be a hub for the community to seek really important services to get them out of the situation. So we're looking at not just Grand Ave Community Center, but have written several grants over the last couple of months, CDBG, MIT grants, and others, to begin retrofitting existing neighborhood centers with the necessary components to allow for this type of redundancy, right? Some of these centers aren't equipped to roll up a generator or land battery storage and be able to disconnect from the grid. So you need to add automatic transfer switches and actuaries and other components that make these facilities resilient ready for any future situation. And so we are looking to improve those facilities, and those are some of the ideas that landed in the plan.
Yeah, so Chris, I'm not sure if you're watching the time, but since we started late, we're running a little short. So I'll actually just say at this point, I'm actually going to hang out in the event space, so we probably won't have time for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to connect with me in the event space, and we'll fly through these last couple of strategies, give you the high-level 30-second view. But if anybody wants to follow up and learn about learn more about some of these, please feel free to reach out to us. So mobility was a huge part of this Future Ready plan. And really, actually, our focus in this particular plan, we're trying to coordinate with other regional partners and other plans, but we really wanted to think about the technology layer of how do we better tie together all of our mobility options. So how can we tie it together so you can use a bus, see information about the bus, Sunrail, and scooter share all in one place. So that's really a big focus from a mobility perspective. Chris, you want to touch on materials real quick?
Yeah, and I'll just quickly on mobility, I will say that we're super excited that later this week we will be unveiling the first all-electric zero-emission bus in the city's history. It'll be deployed in limo, and that's part of us moving towards Future Ready as well. And so big shout out to Lynx, OUC, and of course our city for that partnership. I will also got to give a plug to our partner in change, Charles Ramdat, who early on in this process, in that timeline that I talked about earlier, really kickstarted our thought process around going after the Smart Cities Challenge and working with us this entire time. So huge amount of gratitude to Charles for his efforts. On the material side, really quickly, we have a Greenworks goal of moving to zero waste to landfill by 2040, meaning a future in Orlando where waste is not considered waste that we throw away into a hole, but it's considered a resource that can be recycled back into the economy in one way or another. And so we've done a lot as it relates to the Future Ready component of launching an ORL Collects app. Right now, if you can go on any platform and download ORL Collects. It's a fancy recycling app that helps you demystify what products are recyclable and which ones aren't within our stream. And that's really critical. I'll tell you, the #1 search we get is plastic bags. Please do not put your recyclables in plastic bags and throw them in your recycling bin. They create contamination. We've also been focusing on around food waste. About 40% of the food that's grown in this country is literally goes to waste, doesn't get eaten. And so we have been really trying to tackle that with a backyard composter program and commercial collection, but now as part of Future Ready, actually trying to develop a food recovery network to actually enhance more food rescue. So basically get food that's still edible and get it into the hands of people who need it most, our homeless shelters, our soup kitchens, institutions like Second Harvest who can, basically reallocate that edible food to people who need it. So we're excited to be partnering in that project here coming soon.
Yeah, and last but not least, and sorry again, we are a little bit pressed for time. We've become very focused on the digital twin space. We actually, in our community engagement, we actually saw a lot of applications where we could start to use digital twin and simulation technologies to really enhance some of our city assets and services. And so, one of the things we'll actually be starting on very soon is furthering our digital twin strategy. And so this could include a lot of things. One of the use cases was actually our first responders, allowing them to walk into a building virtually if there's some sort of emergency, so they can actually see it virtually before they step in person. Also, more related to placemaking, are there ways that we can leverage digital twin technologies to add some AR and VR to various city experiences to really make some of our city facilities even a greater experience than they are already. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have one more. So Chris?
Yep, no worries. And for those who know me, I'm super passionate about the transition of our energy system. And so our goal has been in lockstep with OUC to provide our city with reliable, resilient, affordable, and sustainable energy services. There's been some big news coming out from OUC the last couple of weeks of committing to a net zero carbon by 2050 future, one that retires our coal plants by the year 2027 at the latest, and rapidly transitions us towards clean and renewable energy sources. So how we've been going about preparing for that is we've been analyzing the distributed generation across the entire city. We've worked with Google Project Sunroof as well as with NREL to do a degen study and really look at how much solar can we land on rooftops and what's not only economically feasible, but what's the adoption probability of achieving that. We've also started to expand a lot of rooftop solar carports and even ground-mounted solar projects. And one of the innovative applications, if you go next, Mike, it is this notion around photovoltaics or floating solar. Here's a really short clip of the first pilot demonstration of floating solar in Orlando that was installed by OUC, and now our region has over 1 megawatt of floating solar installed. Altamont Springs just added a significant amount. You can see that image there. That's at one of their wastewater treatment plant ponds. And of course, the next image is of the Orlando International Airport, where they've been able to install a really unique floating solar array in the shape of the logo of OIA. So for those that are coming from Terminal C over to the main terminal or back and forth, you'll be able to see that from the autonomous tram as we move forward. And we're even trying to convince Mayor of changing his message on that tram to highlight the culture of innovation and sustainability that we have here within the city. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, since we are about out of time, I will certainly hang out in the event space if anybody wants to connect and ask questions. Chris, I'm not sure if you're able to hang out for a little while.
Yep.
As well.
Yep.
So feel free to connect with us, ask us questions. Would encourage everyone to go to orlando.gov/future-ready, our website, and on the right-hand side of that website, you'll see a link to go into that virtual meeting room where you can review our plan in its entirety, and there are comment boards. My contact information is in there, so you can certainly connect with us and let us know your thoughts so we can finalize that plan. So with that,
appreciate you guys listening in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everybody for your time, and really appreciate it.
Cool. So Mike, I guess we can just chill here and maybe answer questions.
Yeah, I think the room turns off at 2 o'clock. So I'll look in the chat and see if I see anything.
So I did see a question from Joel Martin about the docking stations for scooters, and that's something that we'll certainly, happy to circle back to you and connect you to Ian Saconia, who's our bike pet coordinator in the transportation department, and talk through some of that. We've looked at kind of both of those models and the frequency of ridership for our current bike share and scooter share programs, and I think that we're hoping that we see a rebound of that coming out of COVID. But right now, obviously, the ridership has been pretty low, especially for public transit and just micromobility in general. So, definitely interested in exploring other solutions that can minimize the need to pick all of these, scooters up and recharge them. I get the importance of the dock stations. Sometimes they actually help minimize clutter in the right of way as well. So there's some benefits for it, and we're happy to continue to explore that.
Yeah, I see one comment about Orlando setting the pace and bringing others, and then Charles from the city commented about Orange County. I know Andrea is about to speak next. We've actually been working hand in hand with Andrea from the county, their innovation director, who's about to speak, and also Jeff, their sustainability director. We're actually meeting on a regular basis. So this is actually city and county have been working together. County actually participated in our Future Ready community engagement sessions. I think they attended every single one of them. So yeah, we're already working with the county and a lot of our other regional partners, and I think Andrea is about to to talk about that even further.
Yep. I would even say that to go even further, that we're even exploring ways to, co-fund projects together, which I think is really exciting when we start to pool resources and be able to do something that's going to benefit county and city residents. I mean, it's a win-win all day, and that's not something that we tend to do quite often. So it's really refreshing and exciting to work with the county team.
With that, I think we should probably drop off so people can make it to their next session on time. I actually thought ours was just going to cut off at some point. But again, appreciate everybody's time, and I'll be hanging around in the event space, as will Chris, if you want to talk further.
Thank you,
everybody.
Take care.